about the RFP process. This is probably not the most exciting thing in the world that people like to talk about, but it is a process. And it's a process that I've had the opportunity to learn over the last 25, 30 years, working with major corporations, with Lockheed Martin, and those kind of corporations that have to deal with volumes of proposals that come in, and you have to be able to structure that proposal and answer every one of the questions. So that's what you're going to hear about today. I want to ask a couple of questions here out in the audience this morning. First is, how many folks here have bid on RFPs? Okay, we got pretty much about a half and half in here. All right, the second is, do you like doing that process? Do you like all that paperwork that you have to get done to do it? Well, if you're going to win those RFPs, you won't have to do it. That's what it is. For those who haven't bid on or done RFPs, the process that we're going to talk about today is how to structure yourself in your back office or in your company in terms of how you do your business and how you bid on things. We're going to talk a little bit about how to go about positioning yourself correctly to answer all of the questions that come in the RFP. The first thing is everybody understands an RFP, there's an RFP, there's an RFI, there's an RFQ. Each one is different. Has everyone in here, or the ones who have raised their hand, have you had the opportunity to do RFQs? Have you had the opportunity to do requests for information? Okay, each one of those are different. They're not all the same, they ask for different kinds of questions. They're not as voluminous as the RFP process, but they all ask different types of questions. Today what we're going to go through is what I call the 5-step process. And I've actually, if you see down at the bottom, is the copyright part of that, is because it was submitted all the papers to copyright this, is because this is a process that folks need to learn about, and I'm going to try to make some money on it. And it works. Now, the 5-step process really talks about what we're going to talk about today is discovery. Discovery is, for your organization, is how do you discover an opportunity that's going to fit your job, fit what you do, fit your wheelbox, all right? The next is developing what is called an opportunity profile. That's going to be a document that everyone's going to develop for your company, that every time when you look at an RFP, you're going to map it up against your opportunity profile. You're going to say, does my company fit all the kinds of things that I'm looking for in an RFP that I can bid on? The next thing is, if large company, small company, whatever, is a go or no-go. You got to make a decision of whether or not, is this opportunity going to fit? Do I want to spend the money and the time to bid this particular opportunity? If it's a no, you stop. If it's a yes, you're going to develop what is called the compliance matrix. That's a very complicated document that assures you that you're going to answer every question in the RFP. You're going to get your teams together, whether or not you're a small company, big company, whatever. You're going to have your teams together. You're going to start assigning responsibilities. If you're a small company, your name's all the way down the list. You have to do it all. Okay? And then the last is you're going to develop the RFP response. Let's talk a little bit about discovery. These are kind of boring stuff that you have to go through, whatever, but where do you find opportunities? Newspapers, company announcements, websites, organizations, agencies, social media. You find opportunities everywhere, but these are kind of the first steps of where you find an opportunity. Back to again, we did a discovery. Now we're looking at how do you control the process? We talked about the opportunity profile and the compliance matrix and going through the go or no-go decision. And by the way, everyone, if you leave me your information, all of these charts that I will have here today, they will get very detailed. I will send them to you. So you will have a copy of this process. You won't have to memorize, you don't have to take any notes or whatever. You will have a copy of this particular process. The opportunity profile provides you enough information whether or not it's worth your firm, your company, or you to spend the time to bid on that opportunity. Okay? What goes in the opportunity profile? It's nothing but a document. It's your document for your company. It's all the kinds of things that, on the opportunity profile, you need to define about the opportunity. So you're going to put the project name down, project opportunity, term of contract, whether or not it's 3 years, optional years, etc. All right, what the potential top line revenues are for your firm. Your project schedule, is there a bidders conference? Is there a proposal due date? All of those things are good if you trap it down in that one document that you're making a decision on whether or not you're going to bid this. You're going to come back to that document to kind of guide you through, am I meeting those requirements, because the bidders conference is a specific date, and are you going to meet that date? All these things kind of lock you in. There's more things to go in there. You want to have a copy of the scope of the project, whether or not there's an MBE or small business requirements, whether or not there's location requirements. If your firm is in a hub zone and the opportunity that you're looking for requires hub zone or is an extra point or two because of that, you want to have that in there. Is an enterprise zone of value in this particular bid? Are there any hardware, software, kind of system requirements that are involved in this RFP that they're putting out that's going to impact your organization, whether or not you'll be able to interface with that particular system or software? Evaluation point structure, very key. In evaluation point structure, you really want to understand exactly what categories, what are they going to look at heavily within the RFP, and how they're going to give you points. Sometimes there's a technical side of the job, and that might be 20% of the points. Some want to know what your experience level is. There are all different kinds of point structures. Understand the point structures, because when you are preparing your RFP, you want to prepare that RFP so that you can make sure that you're mapping out to the right point structure that you're going after in that business. All right? Are there any binding requirements? Now, you can't read this, so I'll help you. All right? This is just a document. You'll get it. We're going to send it to you. But this is what a sample opportunity profile will look like. All the kinds of things I just read to you, but some additional things. Who's the evaluation team? Who's on the evaluation team? What kind of technology requirements did they have? Who's the contact person that was on that? Now, if you look at this and you think about this in a structured format, if you were to do an opportunity profile for all the work that you do, you have a 3-ring binder now for everything that you looked at. You got your opportunity profile, here's something that we looked at, and you got a yes or no whether or not this one we went after, this one we didn't go after. But again, you're structuring a way of every time when you look at an opportunity, you have a track record of what you did, why you did it, what were the dates that you were supposed to do certain kinds of things. And it's all right down there in front of you. And if you decide to go forward, you can come back to this particular document and make sure, if you're managing that document, that you're meeting the requirements that you first looked at in that opportunity. And so, when you're working on an opportunity profile, you also want to gather as much information as you can about the folks that you're going out to try to do business with. You want to check websites. Everybody checks the website today. Depending on if you're a small business, minority business, etc., whatever, and there may be diversity of objectives in the annual reports, they're going to talk about that. And you're going to tie back, when you're writing your response, you're going to tie back your what was in the annual report to your response of how you are answering and how you are facilitating as a company the things that they said that they're about in their annual report. So the annual report is very, very important. A lot of people don't look at it, but it's very, very important if you have companies that you're going after that has an annual report. And so you get as much company background and profile information. If it's a government agency, you even get more information. Government agencies, you will have a specific website that you can go to that is about that agency. And they will always tell you everything about that agency that you may want to steal a line here, steal a line there, and plug that into your RFP response. And so we're down here now. We just went through, we went through the go or no go. It's a go for us on this particular project in this room today. The next thing we're going to have to do is develop the compliance matrix. Now, what does the compliance matrix do? This is the toughest part of an RFP. It's ensuring that you answer all the questions, all the requirements, everything that they're asking for in that RFP. You're going to create a compliance matrix to do that. I'm going to take a break here for a second and tell you a little bit about how this is created. And this is really created off of, it begins off of the scope. In every RFP that you ever pick up, you ever read, it's got a scope document, all right? Most of the RFPs come out and it's in PDF format. And I'm not sure if I'm going to test you here in this room, but your skills in terms of how you're able to take text and you put that text into the format the way you want it is how successful you're going to be able to do to create your compliance matrix. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. All right. So in the compliance matrix, it's really nothing but a table. It's going out, and I'll start with the scope of the document, and you're going to create a table, and what you're going to do, now how many people have done this before? You're going to, today the Adobe products will allow you to scrape all of the text out of a PDF. All of it out of a PDF. You're going to copy all that text out of a PDF, and you're going to open up a Word document, and you're going to drop it in there. You're going to go down the menu for tables, and you're going to say text. You're going to say, I think it says text to table. All right? And you're going to click on it, and guess what it's going to do? It's going to wrap a table around all of that stuff that was in that PDF. That's the first thing it's going to do. What I usually do after that specific process is when you're doing the copying all of the text, it's going to copy the lines, the headings, and all those other kind of things. So I kind of go through the document and I wipe out the line, the headers and the footers or whatever. So now I have nothing but straight text that was in the scope of that particular document. The next thing I do is highlight the table and say, create me a column on the right side. Usually about this little narrow column. And then I create another column, and if I need another one, I create another. Usually about 3 columns. In those columns, I will start to assign things to people as we go through this particular process. But why do we want to do this? Notice it says description of the event. That is the scope. Assigned responsibility. That's another little column. Due date. If you're a large company and you got, people's got to, you start to assign different pieces of the scope to certain people to write those things or do some investigative stuff on it, all right? And then maybe a status column. So I got some columns now in my compliance matrix. Now you can't see all this right here, but here's a live, true compliance matrix document that we did about, I guess this was about a year ago or so. It wasn't this year, it was last year, because I can see the dates down here. I hid the names of what the projects was. I call it project company ABC, so I could put this out to everyone. This here went against the scope of the document. And it was all the text that I didn't write this. They wrote it on the right-hand side. Everything on this side was my team. And on my team, we had dates when certain things were to go out, who was going to be responsible for it, etc. in the teams, making sure that everything was getting addressed. Down in D, the last part there, Nakia, she was handling all of the tax issues and exempt issues, because there are projects that are tax exempt projects. You have to make sure that if you have a tax exempt project, that you're setting them up when you set this company up, that you're going to make sure you set them up in your systems as a tax exempt project. Remember one thing I said to you. I said you did an opportunity profile. That first said that it's an opportunity that you want to go after. The second I said is your compliance matrix. This compliance matrix that you're going to create, You're going to constantly use it because once you win the project, guess what you're going to go back to? Right back to what you told the folks that you were going to do in the project, but it's all been mapped out. Who was working on that section, how they said we were going to do this particular process. Now, if you're a small company, it might be just you're going back to it. But if you're a larger company and you are disseminating out the responsibilities to others to get this part done, then you have a roadmap when you're going through this particular process. And so now we just finished, we're in the third step of the process, which is called the compliance matrix. And again, I want to put some more emphasis on the compliance matrix. It's the most important part of an RFP. RFPs, you've seen it before. You don't answer all the questions, you're disqualified. This is a way to ensure that you answer all the questions and all the important questions. So if you can take a very voluminous, say, scope of the document and throw it into a compliance matrix, you can start to read down there and you can see things that aren't applicable that you don't have to even come back and address again. You identify that in your compliance matrix. Don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. Oh, this is important, gotta check. Okay? And so what we're doing is we're slicing and dicing through large pieces of information. And when you slice and dice through this large pieces of information, you want to make sure that the next time when you go back and you start reading your document, you're not reading the same thing over and over and over again. This is what complicates folks when they work on RFPs. Because you go back to the same document again, you start reading again, and you go right back to that same cycle again. You have to take the content, break it down smaller and smaller to the point you're not rereading stuff that don't make any more sense to it at all in the project because you're not responsible for it. And you only want to key in on what you're responsible for. So let's move to the next step. The next step is, depending on how large your company is, you're going to set up your project teams. If you're, again, if you're a single company and you're a sole proprietor, you're going to do all these kinds of things. But if you're a larger company, you're going to start assigning some tasks, all right? And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to develop the RFP itself. Now, how do you control the proposal creation process? Well, in the next steps that we're going to talk about is more of control on all the kinds of things you need to do, look at, and be concerned about to get this thing out the door. Okay? So let's start and talk about I don't know the size of your companies or whatever, but I'm going to take this company, I'm going to say it's a 5-person company, it's 5 people working in the company. So we've already created the compliance matrix document, okay? We've gone through and made some preliminary assignments, all right? And now we're going to organize my project team in-house. So all 5 people in the company, they're on the project team, okay? So we're going to walk through that now. So now we're going to create what is called the project checklist, assign dates and responsibilities. This is the next step. I don't care how large your project is. You're going to have to assign people with responsibilities. And when you went through the compliance matrix, there may be some dates due for certain kinds of things. And so you're going to, whoever is the project manager or pursuit manager over top of this opportunity is going to create that checklist. That checklist and start to assign some dates and responsibilities when people are supposed to get things done. You're going to have to create a budget. Because if you think you're going to bid on something and put no money into it, and you get to the end of the day, you're not going to get your results that you want. You've got to have some money to be able to bid on a job, period. You've got to have funding to do it. You've got to figure out when you are doing this particular job, at the end, if you win the job, what's the impact going to be on your organization once I win this particular opportunity, and how much am I going to need to get that startup process working? Okay? You provide document management services for the project. When I talk about document management services, That's more of your skill set of how do you store things. If you have multiple people working on RFPs, then you got to figure out in your organization how people are not going to step on each other in terms of their code changes, etc. You know, I love to use the review process under Word. Okay, I like to use the review process under Word only because you can back out changes, people make modifications and changes or whatever. When you are reviewing, when you use the review function underneath a Word, now you can start to collectively see who, what, where, when, put what into that specific document. But you have to have some kind of internal control within your organization of how do you control your changes that goes in. Now, sometimes that's difficult. I know when I was just doing straight RFPs and I was being a pursuit manager, I was living in Florida, okay? And I had people working on RFPs all over the country. Some was in Boston, some was in California. So these are all people that were assigned on the specific project. And now we've got, as being the pursuit manager, I'm going to kind of tell you a concept of what I then did. We gave out all the assignments. They brought the assignments came into me, and then I wordsmithed those assignments into the correct place for the response to do the end portion of the response. And so I'm acting like the pursuit manager of everything's got to come back to me. Now I'm plotting it in to the right sections where it is. So I was more or less the pursuit manager. I wasn't the one going out doing all the research work. But when it came back in, when you have multiple different writers, you have people with different writing styles. And when you have people with different writing styles, the issues you have now is that it doesn't blend. And so you need to, if you're a larger company, et cetera, or multiple people working on things, you got to have somebody that's that pursuit manager that is kind of wordsmithing this thing together to make it sound like it is all coming from your company. Okay, and so you'll develop terms in your things. If you joint ventured with another company, you said my alliance partner. Every time you start off, our alliance partner. You know, it's those kinds of things that you will blend into that response. The next thing is setting up a project area or folders or documents. There's somewhere where people are going to have to stow stuff, put their changes in, and you can go out and get that. One of the main things is whenever you're doing a job is, particularly if you're bringing on partners, did you get an NDA? Has that been signed? Do you have a teaming agreement? Is a teaming agreement going to be needed to be displayed in the proposal itself so that folks know that you're teamed with and you have a legitimate document that says that this is your teaming partner or your alliance partner? And so this what I'm showing you today is a master checklist that you kind of go through and you add on to it for things that are applicable to your business. All right? You got to have somebody that facilitates the project team status meetings. And that's what I used to do all the time. I used to beat people up. You know? And it's like, you ain't got your stuff done. How come you ain't got it done? What's going on? And you can have every excuse in the world when you've got a larger team putting an RFP together because people hate to have to do the detailed work. They'd rather do the easy stuff first or whatever. And so I'm the beat up man. I'm the person that was always beating up. PRWT, I beat up everybody. You know, you be getting your stuff into me, man, because look, this thing got to go out, it's got to go out the door. You know what I mean? But I beat up people all the time because that was my job. I'm the pursuit manager. We got to get this thing out the door because these RFPs are the lifeblood of your company. I mean, if you really think about it, big business now is putting everything out either in RFI, RFQ, RFP. They're putting it all out there. Now you've got to be competitive. You've got to figure out how to do that. And you've got to, or else you've taken a whole segment out of how do you get new business. You've taken that segment out and you've lost. And so if you think your job or your company has a potential of growing without the RFP process in it, you're sadly mistaken as it goes forward. As you look at business today, Companies are merging up, merging up, merging up, merging up. And so small business is having more and more difficulty in trying to compete because it's all about scale and it's all about capacity. Scale and capacity is what you're trying to achieve. And that's why you move into things of teaming agreements and joint ventures. You get into those kinds of things because you need to grow your organization. You need to be able to say that I'm teamed with a so-and-so billion-dollar company. And that company has a good track record in doing X, Y, Z. And my company is now being mentored by that specific company. I didn't say that, use that so many different times, unbelievable. Let me tell you, it's real easy to say that, hey, when you're a small company, and I'm a small company, we're roughly a $40 million company, we're Black Enterprise. Last year we were 78, this year we're 73 on Black Enterprise's list, top 100 minority-owned companies in the country. So, we're trying to grow our business, all right? And to do this, you got to wrap process around things. Let's go to the next step here. This one here, you got to gather questions for bidders conference. Most RFPs that come out on the street will have a bidders conference. And what do you do when you go to that bidders conference? When you go to that bidders conference, you look around, because guess what? You may not even have a partner. Okay, when you go to that bidders conference. You may not have a partner to do it, but you're there trying to figure out how in the heck am I going to do this particular job. And so you look in the room, and the beauty of going to a bidders conference is you get a list of everybody who went to the bidders conference. And so your job then is, I'm giving you more information than just the RFP process, but it is a part of how you find who you're going to work with on this particular job. And guess what you're going to do then? When you go down that list and you're going to see 4 or 5 different companies and they're all up there trying to bid, guess what you're going to do? You're going to try to get on their list, telephone list, call them and see if you can come in and do a presentation on your company to see if you can be a partner on that specific job. So this is a way in the whole RFP process that you may not be big enough to be able to do the job, but there may be, let's go back to the opportunity profile, and it asked the questions of, was there any diversity requirements or small business requirements on that specific opportunity, and there may be a percentage of that that's due on it. So that company that's bidding needs to find what? Needs to find a small business that they can bid on, that they be comfortable with. And so that's one of the reasons why when you're going through this particular process, as you go through the bidders conference, you are using it to your advantage point. They're going to usually there's kind of questions that all come up in the bidders conference, and they would normally send all of those questions back out to everyone at that time. Package response, your charts and your graphs. When you're preparing an RFP, you want to do it in a fashion that makes you look good as a company. You want to be able to be as concise as possible when you answer a question. If you give people a lot of fat, too much fat, all right, you got to figure out how to cut off the fat and just leave just the meat. Okay, because if you start writing and give a whole bunch of people a whole bunch of fat, and they got to go figure out what the answer is and all this other kind of good stuff, guess what? People who the evaluation team, bam! That's where you are. Hey, is there a trash can over there? That's exactly where they go. They go right into a trash can. Because people are people just like you. You know when you get a letter comes into your business. If they don't capture your attention in the first paragraph, where does that letter go? There you go. Go there. And so now, when you're doing this whole RFP response, again, you're back into that same concept. You're having humans who are reading your response, and they are just like you are. They don't want to hear no bull crap. They want you to get to the question that they ask. And do you have the qualifications? Have you done it before? All right. What benefits when you're writing in a paragraph? We talked about that. Pat and I talked about this a little bit earlier. Every paragraph that you write has got to have some benefit in it. It's got to have some proof in it. All right, that you can do this particular work. And you've got to be able to say, why me? Why you want my company? You got the benefit, get some proof, and then why it's good to work with this company. Okay, and what we bring to the table. If you think about what I'm just saying, every paragraph has to have meaning in it. The concepts that I'm telling you about right now is the same concepts that Lockheed Martin uses when they go out and bid on the job. Everything in their proposal has meaning, and they're strict about it. Okay, they just don't write a bunch of words. They are always focused on the opportunity, where we have experience at, why it is a benefit that you work with us, who we've done it with before. And as I was talking to Pat earlier, a lot of times in an RFP, they'll ask for references, and you'll provide references. But you only get a chance to provide maybe 3 references. I'll give you that as an example. But what you want to do in your RFP is to wrap in other references that you have in your document, that when it comes to a certain thing, when you talk about proof, yes, we did that with so-and-so, our customer so-and-so, we did that with so-and-so, we had a success story over there. Now you're starting to do what? Throw the names of other companies that you're servicing. You're throwing those names in there, okay? You're giving them more than just the reference point of the 3 references that they asked for. You're saying proof of who I did it with before. So you expand your area of, do they have the qualifications? Do they have the qualifications? You just expanded that by being able to add that into your document. Important, number 14, very important. How many people understand what a red team review is? Red team, you know what that is? After you got all your stuff together, all the RFP together, all those kinds of things are all in place, etc. Now, you got another team of folks, whether or not, if you're so surprised, you're doing that too. Now you're reading the entire RFP, it's red team review. A red team review is now we're putting red marks on stuff. You are going through it and looking at it, the last point in time looking at it, and saying, you know, did I really want to say this and all those kind of things? Can I shorten this up a little bit? That's the red team review. That's the last thing that happens before the RFP goes out the door. It's the red team review. That's a very, very important process, because red team review is doing a bunch of things. They're going back. Remember what I said. Everything has its purpose. Remember we designed the opportunity profile. Red team review is going back and looking at, okay, when's this thing supposed to go out the door? Okay, that means that we now got to get this thing ready. You know, it's on the checklist of when it's supposed to go, but it's another checkpoint. We got to get this thing ready, but it's got to be out the door. In many RFPs, they will tell you how many copies you're supposed to have. That's all part of red team review. Do we have enough copies? Is it out there? Some RFPs are being shipped by way of email. If it's shipped by email, one of the most important things you can do is to put on there your request receipt buttons. You know why you want to do that? Because they got timings on RFPs. They say it better be in by a certain period of time. And if it's not in by a certain period of time, then you're disqualified. And so what you want to always have on your side is proof. Wait a minute, I sent it to your address, here's my proof. It has happened before. Because when you're ever dealing with technology, it can happen on the other side, and they may say they didn't get it.
Is red team the same team that writes the proposal or different?
It could be some of the same team it's depending on how large the organization is. Larger organizations can use a separate group of people because they have the resources. Smaller corporations, smaller companies, sometimes they're the same people, just rereading some of the same thing as the whole thing has been put together, you know. And what I want to do now is stop and take a few questions. Because the RFP process is not the most exciting thing in the world. Enterprise zone is different than the hub zone. Enterprise zone is more statewide. Okay. In Philadelphia, the Navy Yard is enterprise zone.
Oh,
okay? The government, federal government creates hub zones.
On the hub zone.
Yeah,
And
that's-
that's for the enterprise.
Yeah, enterprise zone, yeah, and so for certain, you can't be in both unless you're a large enough company to have remote locations, that some of the remote locations are in enterprise zones too.
Okay,
And those are promoted by the state,
okay.
those particular areas. No question.
I guess that probably 99% of what I touch, the I's, P's, and Q's, are online. Usually through an outsourced bid tool, supplier connection, supplier gateway. So the contractor, they give you a very, very limited scope. It's not sufficiently detailed. So if you have to wait for a bidders conference, usually that's done electronically on a WebEx. So you don't really get the opportunity to see who you might be able to partner with.
Okay.
I find that if I submit questions prior to the bidders conference, so that I can expand on what my understanding of what my operating parameters might be, I'm not getting responses. So then that really kind of puts us behind the eight ball. It is a challenge.
On those bid tools, very, very difficult, okay? Because it's more about price. And can you do X, can you do Y, that's it, you know, yes, no, those kind of things. Very, very difficult. Those are different types of RFPs. There are a lot of companies that's moving towards that, okay? But whenever you're doing something that is large, in the multi-millions of dollars, they normally are still coming out with bid documents. That's what the procurement folks do in most of your particular companies today. But hold that question. I'll come back to you at a later date and time, and let's work with that issue. Okay?
A lot of times you'll have contracting officers who are handling them who want to be fair to everyone in the process. So maybe they're not answering your question at that time, but if you look, whenever they do actually have a bidders conference, they're required to post the answers to all questions received.
To everyone.
To everyone. Right, so you will never get a personal response. They will always take your question, you'll see the answer come up in a mass response they send out because of fairness issues.
Correct, and along with my questions, everybody else's questions.
Right, exactly, you gotta go follow them.
But sometimes that don't happen though. That happens so often, 3 days before the thing is submitted.
There is a process normally whenever you deal with, especially with government contractors, a contracting officer, and they'll give you a date when all your questions are supposed to be in, and then they'll say it's closed now. Okay? Trust me, it ain't closed. You've got to be creative enough to write the emails and say, you know what? This is true fact. We're working on RFP right now. That spreadsheet you guys sent, it don't work. Okay? And I think it's going to affect all the bidders that the spreadsheet doesn't work. All right? I think that you need to consider fixing that spreadsheet so that we can add the prices into the columns that we're supposed to do, because it doesn't work. All right? Our job was supposed to be over at 8:15. I've gotten this thing extended all the way now to 9:30. Okay? And each time I found issues in the proposal that they sent out and the documents that they sent out, that they had to come out and write amendments to those. And so you have to stay on top of it. The last thing I want to also say to you too, particularly if a lot of folks in here are bidding on government contracts. If you're bidding on government contracts, your best advocate is the Small Business Administration. They got representatives. They're supposed to help you. You go to them. Okay, I'm just giving you some tricks of the trade. You go to them. Okay, you sit down and say, I'm thinking about doing this RFP, but can you give me help, any guiding, or whatever. And you can, in Washington, D.C., you have a person called a PCR. PCR is a procurement contract representative. Then they down on top of the field, we have the contracting officer. There's a whole structure in the government, a way of doing business. And you have to get in, put your shoes on, put some gas in the tank. Yeah, when in Washington, D.C., you got to walk some walls. Okay, if you want to get business. All right.
Well, actually, you have PCRs all over the country. They're funded by the Department of Defense. But yes, they are procurement center representatives who assist and help small businesses. The other thing is, when you're talking about government contracting, it's very important on whatever requirement that you're working with, that once that requirement comes out in Fed Biz Ops, that you register and you sign in as an interested party, because anytime there is an amendment, anytime there are questions, et cetera, you know, that information is mass email. The other thing is, going back to earlier in the presentation, that's also a great way to find teaming partners from the interested parties as well. Another thing in dealing with government contracting, back on step 2 where you were speaking about the annual report, on the government side, one of the best tools is the federal procurement data system. Because if whatever requirement you're going after, it's under a certain NAICS code. Now, I will say in all fairness that it is a very big and complex system. Okay, congressmen use it to find out what monies, federal monies are coming into their areas. But if you can go in there and search by the NAICS code that you're looking at that requirement, and then by the particular agency or department or whatever, you can see every award under that NAICS code that's gone out. You can see if it was a basin for 1-year options. You can see when it's coming up for recompetition. There's so many things that you can find out. And just by the way, I'll be here today and tomorrow. I'm with the State Department. I've been in small business for 7 years. And so the other thing is, in theory, SBA, their business development officers are supposed to help.
Absolutely.
But I encourage you, you can go to osdabu.gov and you can look at every federal agency, small business office, the director, and all the persons in that office. Their phone numbers, their emails are there. I think we go an extra inch beyond what SBA does in helping small businesses.
Navigating business through the federal government is not an easy task, but you can break it down into smaller tasks to make it easy. The first is actually finding an agency that you want to go work for. Not only just once you find an agency, is diving down into that agency, whether it's Homeland Security or whatever, diving down into that and look for, this is what I always did, Fed Bid Ops, forget it, throw it out the water, okay? If by the time it gets up to Fed Bid Ops, everybody's got it, okay? What I would always do is I would go and see what are they going to put out in the next 6 months. Who is the contracting officer for it? And get in the car and go down and give a presentation to them that says, I'd like to bid that. I've got the qualifications, I'm going to work with that, and develop the relationship with those folks. You're so close here to Washington, D.C., if you want to win business, it's a process. That's all I can tell you. It's a serious process. And I'd rather go after stuff that is not even on Fed Bid Ops yet. It's out there, and I want to develop a relationship. I used to have people set up. As soon as we would find something 6 months out or whatever, first thing they would do was send them an email. So, here's my company, we're very much interested, boom, boom, boom. Then the next email they get, can we come up and start can we come down and visit you and tell you a little bit more about our company, we're very interested or whatever. And 9 out of 10, that person will then invite you and set you up with a meeting to come down and visit them. And so that's the beginning process. Now I'm going to get back to this again.
I'm going to out myself. I'm an obstacle director at EPA. And you're exactly right, there's a number of things that you said. In addition to what you just mentioned, it's very difficult to get that walk through the door, I want to meet you right now, relationship. And the question is, who are you going to have that discussion with? And you have to know your federal agency, you have to know the procurement process, because even though we all follow the FAR, with the exception of DOD and the other agencies, There are different nuances within each agency that will help you. That's where your auditor office can help you. They can help you decide who you really need to meet with on that procurement. The second thing is, look at our forecast. Every federal agency is required to put out a forecast of contracting opportunities that tells you what's happening that fiscal year and 3 years out. My agency is quite dogged about keeping theirs very updated. So when you look at our forecast, it's usually true to form. We make sure we take things off if we decide to go another direction or things we're not going to do. So we keep it updated regularly. But that's where you can look when you're going to do that look ahead thing and say, what can I do to myself for? Not what's in FedConnect or FedBizOps right now, but what's coming down the pipeline. The third thing is you need, if you're doing where you are in your business, if you already have savvy, which is an RFP, that's great. But if you need some hand holding, it's your PTAC you need to talk to. Your PCR, they're great once you have a contract. They're the ones who can help you most once you're already in the door. But the ones who are going to help you from the beginning and will hold you, and not just through the RFP process, they'll hold you through some formative processes with your business. They'll help you with your certifications. They can help you with your business plan. There's a local PTAC all over the place. You can go online and just Google PTAC, and there's a site that will tell you which one is in your local area. And that's all.
We're going to wrap up right now because I'm standing in between you and lunch. But first I want to ask a couple questions. Is that there should be evaluation sheets that you'll end up getting, I hope, for this particular session. I'd like you to fill out those evaluation sheets so I can figure out whether or not this was helpful to you guys. I want to make sure that each of you can get a copy of the presentation because it's really a cookbook of how to put all the things into order to make sure you have a process in place in your organization, all right? And the last thing I want to do is say thank you very much for joining me and listening to me, because this is probably one of the most boring subjects in the world, but I is actually, I'm passionate about what I like to do, and thank you.
Your special